Welcome to Creation in the 21st Century. I'm your host, Carl Ball, founder and director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. The title to today's program is, Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. Now, we all have a heart. Physically, we have a heart. Emotionally, we have a response mechanism to the deeds of life, to the philosophy of life, to the creation that God provided for us, and to the physiological factors that affect us in this life. We have in the studio today in the audience a dear friend of mine whose great uncle invented the heart stent. Now, the invention of that heart stent literally saved the lives of millions of people around the world, including my father for a number of years before he passed, including my mother to this very hour, and including many friends and our special guest that I'll introduce in just a few moments. Let not your heart be troubled was a statement made by the one with the greatest compassion ever exercised in the history of the universe. Jesus Christ made that statement. And in the couching of the statement, let not your heart be troubled, he said, you believe in God, believe also in me. There was innate within that statement a conjunction between the physical heart, its emotions, its electrical impulses, and its response physiologically as well as philosophically to the very brain. He said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God. Now that is corollary with a statement, with a heart man believeth unto righteousness. And then with the mouth, confession is made unto salvation. Which brings me to a poster that I've used many, many times on this program, having to do with the human brain, recognizing the incredible melodies of the universe, the physical dimensions of the universe. And I've often said that that single brain, 3.5-pound brain, resident within the human body and the human cranium, that particular brain has the ability to measure the distance to the farthest star, weigh the mass of the universe, and interpret the signals the universe gives off. But that is not all. Recently, a publication was made in the technical mainstream peer-reviewed literature in Canada, indicating that the heart-brain connection is far deeper, more elaborate, more intricate, more interdependent than we had ever imagined in the history of medical science. In fact, that particular article went on to relate the research that had been done over a number of years, indicating that the connections with the physical heart, I don't simply mean the inner man. We've normally interpreted the heart to be the inner man. Well, it is, but it's more than that. But the literal physical heart has neurological connections to the brain, has literal enzymes that generate cellular structure with memory. I mean the physical heart. Some research indicates that the basic emotions, the philosophic mindset of the individual are literally centered in the memory cells of the physical heart. And of course, it's correlated with the brain itself. So when we say, with the heart, man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth, confession is made unto salvation, that is literally true. And now we're recognizing to some measure that the heart is in essence its own specific emotional, physiological brain. But now, I have a special guest that I've had on the program many times over the years. He practices good medicine. In fact, he's my personal physician. He has practiced medicine that years ago saved his own life, having to do with cholesterol. And he did advanced research in this area. Not only that, but recently, this dear friend of mine literally had a heart attack after he'd been a guest on my program. He was lecturing on a ship to a group of travelers, and in the midst of that, he had a coronary. Yet, the doctor said, his own medical doctor said, were it not for the practices and the mindset, and that's what I've been talking about for the last few minutes, the physiological practices, the dietary practices, the mindset of this individual, he would have been delivered as a corpse. But instead, he's on the program today. My dear friend, my personal physician, Dr. Dale Peterson, MD. And I think MD today stands not only for medical doctor, but for miracle demonstration. Welcome back.
Great to be here, Carl.
It is great to be here. I mean, you were here a few months ago and robust in health. Today, you're robust in health. Tell us how you, as a physician, were able to anticipate problems like this, and because of your own mindset, your spiritual relationship with God, and your dietary practices, you overcame this in a miracle dimension. Tell us, please. Welcome home.
Well, glad to be here. People say, if what you're talking about is true, why did you have a heart attack? And what people don't understand is I was ready to have a heart attack almost 20 years ago.
Yes.
In my mid-40s, and that's my family history. We have up here traditional risk factors for heart attack, one of which is a cholesterol less than HDL, less than 40. Mine's never been above 30. And a family history of a man or a woman having a heart attack before the age of 55. My father died of a heart attack at 54. My brother had a heart attack at 45. Most of my male cousins had heart attacks or bypass surgery before the age of 50. And I was along that path. But because I began working with the design of the body, looking at what is the mechanism by which hardening of the arteries, blocking of arteries occurs.
The design rather than the evolutionary development.
Yes. I was actually able to extend the time from when I was anticipating a heart attack to when it actually happened by well over a decade, perhaps as much as 15 years.
Marvelous.
Beyond that, when it did occur, it didn't kill me, which is even more amazing.
Now, take us through it. You were lecturing on a tour.
It actually happened in advance of that, but I had not been aware of it because for about 7 years, I've wrestled with a condition, I'll throw out a big term here, paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. Paroxysmal is a fancy medical term, means it comes on suddenly with no warning.
Okay.
Atrial means the upper chambers of my heart just start to vibrate. They no longer pump the blood into the lower chambers, and that's fibrillation.
Yes.
Okay? When that occurs, I have always had symptoms that are similar to those of a heart attack. Breaking out in a sweat, feeling very weak, short of breath, sometimes heaviness in the chest, and this is always resolved over 24 to 48 hours. And people who suffer from this particular challenge, like me, understand exactly what I'm talking about. Well, apparently during one of those episodes, I also had a heart attack. And unbeknownst to me, I went on with my speaking engagement.
Yes, and the electrocardiogram later demonstrated you did have.
In retrospect, I discovered I'd had a heart attack.
But now tell us, you were able, and in a moment you'll explain how your body got through that, where almost all individuals would have succumbed to it. But you went on, you were on a ship lecturing.
My heart went out of rhythm. Instead of coming back into rhythm, stayed out of rhythm. And as a result, fluid began to accumulate in my system. And when that happened, I gained about 20 pounds over the course of a week.
1 week you gained 20 pounds.
Difficult to breathe at that point because of the fluid in my lungs. When I came back, I had a test called an echocardiogram, which is an ultrasound of my heart. And I saw the heart specialist, the cardiologist. He said, I've looked at your echocardiogram and you're not supposed to be here.
That's the reason you're MD, the miracle dimension.
My heart was functioning at approximately 50% capacity, and it put me in a range that he anticipated that I was likely to die suddenly of an irregularity or a stoppage of the heart. And he suggested, the damage is done. I have nothing I can offer you, but I can put in what's called a defibrillator that will shock your heart if it stops.
Okay.
My challenge is with the paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, that can trick that device into shocking the heart when there isn't a stoppage and actually kill somebody.
Okay.
So I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, on one hand, my heart could stop. I'm with the Lord. It's all over.
Yes.
On the other hand, I could trigger the device and be shocked to death. And that didn't seem very appealing.
That's not appealing at all. Now, did your cardiologist recognize that the lifestyle and the mental, philosophic, and spiritual and emotional response that you had practiced for long years was a factor in
Yes, he
preserving
recognized
your
that
life?
given the risk factors that I had, it was marvelous that I had survived to the age 63 that I was.
Yes.
But he clearly at that point, he didn't express it in words, but his face said it all. He really believed I was a dead man walking.
Yes.
And,
yes.
but I was not nearly as pessimistic because I know the person who created the body and I know that he can heal the body.
Yes.
And he's designed
Yes.
marvelous mechanisms within it to do just that.
And your children called me. Your wife was preoccupied with you. So your children called me and kept me apprised of the data. You were prayed for night and day. So God gave a marvelous miracle dimension demonstration in your life, so you're on this program.
Right. Well, what happened was, as you said, I had people literally around the world praying for me.
Yes.
That's most important. Secondly, I know a technique for programming the body's computer, and I instructed it to begin regenerating the damaged heart muscle. I gave supports that the heart needs for energy production and healing.
Yes.
And so 2 months later, I went back and had another echocardiogram, another study of the heart.
Okay.
And at that point, my heart was not functioning at 50% capacity, but rather 80 to 90% capacity, well above the risk for sudden death and near normal levels.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, not only are we glad you're here, this audience needs you. And this is a program of information having to do with creation, number one, having to do with science, and you're a medical, scientific practitioner. In fact, in the past, you've been on the faculty at University of Minnesota Medical College, University of Oklahoma Medical College, headed your own, for a number of years, your own clinic, etc., and have been in medical practice all these years. So as a practitioner, medical practitioner, Dale, we need to know certain things about how our lives should function. Will you share the benefit of what you have learned and who you are with us in this audience in these moments remaining, please?
It boils down to how does hardening of the arteries, the technical term being atherosclerosis, how does it really develop? And the initial triggering factor is injury to arterial linings.
Okay.
And there are many ways that can happen. Cigarette smoking.
Oh, yes.
If one takes a puff on a cigarette, they inhale a quadrillion free radicals.
A quadrillion
Some people may
free
not know what a
radicals.
quadrillion is, but it goes million, billion, trillion, quadrillion
Yes.
for each puff. Can
For
you
each
imagine
puff.
the damage that's doing internally, not only to arteries, but other parts of the body? And that's why that accelerates the development of heart attack, stroke, and other complications.
I understand that every cigarette smoked takes 8 minutes of the life of the individual on average. And now can understand how that would be possible. A quadrillion free radicals affecting the function of the body, the heart, and the arteries as well. Take us further.
There's a substance in the body called homocysteine. And homocysteine is inflammatory, causes injury in arteries. Now, that's one mistake I made, I admit it. I had it checked. It was 5.7, which was well within the safe range, but I didn't consistently follow up on it, and after my heart attack, it was found to be 9.6.
Okay.
If it rises 3 points from 7 to 10, that increases the risk of a heart attack by 35%. And I don't know when that started to rise, and had I known and addressed it, perhaps I could have avoided the heart attack. But we must stop inflammation in arteries. When an artery is injured, the body sends a little white blood cell called a macrophage, which
Yes.
literally means big eater, to maintain security at the site and to look for things in the bloodstream that might cause further injury down the stream. One of the things it notices is damaged, and that's an important word, oxidized.
Yes.
That shouldn't be a foreign word.
Yes.
Here in Texas, I suppose you occasionally see car finishes that have faded in the sun. We say they're oxidized.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
free radical damage.
Yes.
I don't have a car finish inside me, but I have things like LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol. I used to question that. Why would the designer put something harmful, something
That's a big
bad
question.
into his system? And the answer is he didn't. It's absolutely essential for good health, but it is susceptible to damage from free radicals, from cigarette smoke or what we breathe in from
Yes.
the air. And when it's oxidized, LDL cholesterol doesn't look any more like real original LDL cholesterol than an oxidized car finish looks like one on the showroom floor. So we have this little white cell maintaining security, looking for foreign things that might damage blood vessels down the road. An LDL cholesterol molecule floats by, says, have a good day. It's supposed to be there. But a damaged and oxidized LDL comes along, it says, uh-oh, don't recognize that. That's not supposed to be there. Reaches out into circulation, pulls it into the wall of the artery, and that's called a foam cell, which is the first stage of an atherosclerotic plaque.
I see. You've described it visually and beautifully. Now, by oxidized, we all need oxygen to function. The body is designed for oxygen. However, the oxygen we breathe has been contaminated, first of all, by radiation, so that it's stripped of an electron, so it forms an oxidizing bond, a free radical, you and I have discussed many times on this program, forms a bizarre bond, so that while we get the oxygen, we also get that bizarre bonded element which does us great harm. That's a free radical. Cigarette smoke generates a lot of that. So you're revealing to us information, basic information to you. You were able to understand that so that you foreshadowed your heart attack.
Yes.
With good mental, good physical, and good dietary practice.
No, it's interesting that over the years, as you know, God has allowed many, many health challenges to come my way personally.
I know that.
And I believe it's because he knows that there's no greater incentive to look for answers than to personally experience that
You
challenge.
got it.
Now, having had the heart attack, it again drove home to me the beauty of God's design within the body.
All right.
Because when that happened, when the heart muscle began functioning less effectively, the body automatically started producing compounds like ANP and BNP, which got rid of extra sodium from my system to decrease the volume of the blood. It allowed the blood vessels to relax and open up to take the load off the heart, and it did that automatically without me even thinking about it.
Now, can you imagine, you know, you're a former professor in mainstream medical practice. Can you imagine, and you are a former evolutionist, you and I have discussed this many times, we both were. Can you imagine any method by which evolution, experimenting with the human body, could produce that wonderful mechanism that saved your life? Could evolution do it?
I cannot, because when those substances are needed, the situation is such that the individual would die before there was an opportunity for them to evolve.
Oh, surely, surely.
There's no explanation I can come
There
to.
is no evolutionary explanation. The only plausible answer is design. And design requires a designer, the creator.
I've often said, Carl, that the miracle is not that people in the book of Genesis lived for close to 1,000 years. The wonder is that you and I survive at all in the hostile environment we find ourselves in following the Genesis flood.
That's right. In fact, if we have a few moments, we'll talk about that as we've done many times. But time's getting away. Hit the highlights of what we really need to know about this You your philosophic attitude. You know, I talked a bit about the connection, the physical heart-brain connection, and memory cells now being recognized.
I have personally experienced that. I mentioned that my heart tends to go out of rhythm intermittently. And when it does, instantaneously, there's a dramatic emotional change that occurs.
Dale, that needs to be emphasized to this audience. Literally, with a heart, man believeth. And there is an emotional and personal response and a physiological response in the heart in relation to the thought patterns.
When my heart is pumping in a regular rhythm, I'm upbeat, I'm optimistic, I'm saying I can conquer challenges, but the instant that it goes out of rhythm, I'm very pessimistic. I'm not sure that I can do anything constructive. I'm more irritable.
It's an instantaneous reaction.
It's not because I'm looking at it saying, oh, my heart is out of rhythm, that's sad. That's not it. Many times the emotion is what triggers my understanding that my heart's gone out of rhythm.
Yes.
And I have subsequently talked to many people who experience this sort of thing. And they say, you're absolutely right. I hadn't put two and two together, but the same thing happens to me.
That is incredible. And again, that's verification of Scripture. Highlight, what do we need to know? What research projects have demonstrated certain things? In highlight, would you tell us?
Well, it's important to understand that in the United States, research grants come primarily from the pharmaceutical industry. And so there's a tendency for journals to carry only articles supporting the use of certain drugs in the management of challenges.
Surely.
Now, an interesting thing happened. Had here speakers who do not favor drug treatments are not welcome at medical meetings. There was a significant change that happened over the last year. Regulations went into effect that prohibit pharmaceutical companies from giving major grants to physician educational programs.
I see.
And I just last week went to a state medical meeting in Oklahoma that I attend every year. And I have to tell you, Carl, the instruction in that, the speakers at that meeting presented a dramatically different picture than they ever have in the past. For the first time, they were talking about mechanism of development of hardening of the arteries. They were talking about inflammation. They were talking about oxidation of LDL cholesterol. They were talking about the way the platelets in the body function. And I believe it was a direct result that the handcuffs were off, so to speak, and they were not beholden to a drug company to promote a particular approach, a particular drug. So the information is beginning to come out now to physicians that has not been available in general medical meetings for quite some time.
And you should know, you're a past president. I think, what, twice you were president of the Oklahoma State Medical Association.
No, Oklahoma Academy of Family Physicians.
Academy of Family Physicians, which bodes well for your credentials and the respect that the medical community has for you. All right, we have just a minute or two. Hit another highlight of what we need to know.
Well, Dr. Okoyama, who's a Japanese researcher, did an independent review of the world's experience on heart attacks back in 2005. And he looked at lowering cholesterol as a means to prevent heart attacks. And he said this: high cholesterol levels are not associated with heart attack in people over the age of 40 or 50.
Interesting.
High cholesterol levels are associated with lower cancer level incidence and premature death rates. In other words, the higher your cholesterol, in general, the longer you're going to live. There's little benefit in lowering cholesterol levels below 260 in older people. And he said efforts to lower cholesterol increase the risk of developing cancer and shorten lifespan.
That is stunning. There's so much more we could talk about, but I'm going to take my attention from my dear friend, Dr. Dale Peterson, MD, medical doctor and miracle demonstration. As we have seen today, this has been so enlightening even to my own mind and my own heart. Now I want to direct the attention to you. Dr. Peterson knew as a child from the history of his family that he had a heart problem. He was able to anticipate, to rectify the repercussions in a literal, scientific, medical dimension. But now, you have a heart problem. I have a heart problem by nature. It's inherited in our genes, in our history. It's been demonstrated. But it's more than the physical problem of the heart, even though it affects the emotions, as we have clarified and as Dr. Peterson has verified on this program. The physical heart is affected by your philosophy, your mindset, your view of life, by your own emotions and your response to facts. It's with the heart that man believeth, and the mind participates in that in a specific dimension. You see, the heart problem has to do with your very nature. Jesus came to rectify that problem. He recognized it and He said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Now, by the way, Jesus is the only one who can bind up a broken heart. Jesus is the only one whose blood can cure the problem of sin. There is no other answer. He stands alone. I present Him to you this morning as the way, the truth, and the life. Perhaps you're watching this program in the middle of the night or in the late hours. There is no hour that is wrong for you to respond. You need to know that we have a heart problem. We're sinners. Need to know that Jesus is the Son of God. He came, died, shed His blood, arose from the dead, and is at this moment asking entrance literally into your heart. Will you just emotionally, personally, right now, will you just open your heart and say, "Lord Jesus, right now, I ask you to step into my heart. Right now, live in my heart, save me from my sin. I'll serve you with all my heart."
Creation in the 21st Century has been sponsored by Trinity Broadcasting Network, and only with your love gift of support can this program stay on the air. So write to Creation in the 21st Century, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.